This might be the only American soldier to ever capture an enemy without opposable thumbs, and possibly the reason we have a Super Bowl halftime show. Hello, everyone. Today we are looking at the story of Sergeant Stubby and how man's best friend became a war hero in the trenches of World War I by boosting morale, alerting about incoming gas attacks, and even capturing an enemy soldier, and then went on to become the first performer of a football halftime show. But before we get to that, I just want to say thank you for all the support on my Lord of the Rings video. It got way further than I thought possible, so thank you. Anyway, I'll get on with the story. Thank you for watching. Stubby was born. Well, we don't actually know where or when he was born. We didn't have the best records on when people were born back then, let alone dogs. All we know is that in 1917, he was estimated to be between 1 and 3 years old. What we do know for a fact is that someone docked or cut the end off of his tail before he became a stray wandering around the campus of Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. While living there, he is looking all over campus to try and find food scraps, and he discovers that the best place to get them is at the practice fields. The reason for this is because the 102nd Infantry Regiment for the Connecticut National Guard is currently using them to conduct training, meaning that they have a fully operational mess tent, leaving Stubby plenty of opportunity for free bones. As Stubby became a regular at the mess tent, he eventually befriended soldier James Conroy, and the two became inseparable, with Stubby starting to sleep in or around Conroy's tent, and Stubby becomes the classic animal sidekick. He follows Conroy around and starts mimicking. He learns how to march like the soldiers. He learns the different drills they do. He even learns how to salute by sitting on his hind legs and raising his right paw to the side of his face. And to Stubby, this surely had to feel like a fun adventure, hanging out with his two-legged friends, going on cool group walks, and getting fed plenty of bones. But to everyone else, this was serious business because they were training to eventually be sent to fight in World War I. And that's exactly what happens as the unit is selected to join the 26th Infantry Division, aka the Yankees, and is getting ready to ship off to France, so eventually they start packing up their tents and gear. But Stubby, who has become accustomed to a certain lifestyle, ain't having his gravy train take off without him, so he stows away on the ship with Conroy by hiding in the engine compartment, and off they go. At one point during the journey over to Europe, Stubby is found on the ship, and normally stowaways aren't tolerated, but Stubby saluted the commanding officer who found him, and he allowed Stubby to stay. So the division lands in Europe and get everything ready for even more training before they head to the front. What that training looked like included things like bayonet charges, artillery shelling practice so that they could get accustomed to the sounds and vibrations from the guns, firing machine guns, and practice for the inevitable gas attacks, getting used to donning gas masks and fighting with them. And Stubby was no exception. Conroy had a specialty gas mask made for him that he would be able to wear so he could survive the horrific gas attacks, something he would become all too familiar with. After their training was completed, Conroy and Stubby moved forward to the French front where they dealt with gas firsthand as well as the other two famed enemies of World War I, mud and rats. Right! Now, when it comes to mud, I don't know if it would be better or worse to be a dog because on the one hand, being lighter than the men probably helped him not sink so bad into the mud. On the other hand, having the nasty French mud mat itself into hair across your entire body doesn't sound too pleasant either. But when it came to the rats, Stubby proved to be as helpful a companion as any other because rats were an ever-present nuisance on the battlefield. And being a bull terrier, Stubby had the temperament and skill to kill them, and because food was difficult for everyone to come by, he most likely ate them on occasion.
And that doesn't taste very nice, does it, precious?
And another area that Stubby would become invaluable in was in detecting incoming artillery fire and the gas attacks. Something that World War I soldiers learned very quickly is that different artillery rounds have different sounds, and that the shell you don't hear is often the one that kills you. Well, it sure would be nice if we had an animal that could hear the shells we can't. Oh, wait, we do! Stubby became so good at detecting incoming artillery that he would alert soldiers minutes before they would be able to hear the shells themselves. On at least one occasion, he jumped on and barked at a sleeping soldier to wake him up and get him into a safety bunker to protect him from an artillery strike. And it wasn't just Stubby's hearing that came in handy, but also his sense of smell. See, the types of gas that were being used, phosgene, mustard, and chlorine, all have very distinct smells, and Stubby could smell the gas long before it reached the trenches and would alert soldiers that it was coming and to put on their masks. He continued in this work day after day until the unit was called to defend a different line during the German Spring Offensive. Now, the Spring Offensive was basically one giant push by Germany against the Western Front with the hope of defeating the Allies before the Americans showed up to reinforce them. And Yankee Division is going to help and try to hold this line against the Germans. After a long series of German artillery strikes and attacks against the trenches, the Americans, as well as the French and British forces, were able to hold them off and repel the Germans from the small amount of ground that they managed to take. And it was shortly after retaking a trench that Stubby was walking along the ground they had just taken when suddenly a stray artillery shell exploded nearby. He yelped in pain and fell to the ground. Conroy crawled out to him and found that Stubby had taken shrapnel to his left leg and chest. Conroy dressed the wounds as best he could before taking Stubby to a field hospital. And Stubby was taken to that hospital in an ambulance along with other wounded soldiers who demanded that he had the same treatment as them, and the entire unit was concerned that Stubby wouldn't survive. But Stubby isn't going to let a little shrapnel keep him down, and he soon made a full recovery and returned to his unit in time to partake in the summer fighting. And this fighting would take place in a much hotter area of the war to the east of Paris known as the Marne. And this fighting was done different than anything that they were used to. Up until this point, they had been fighting defensively and in the trenches, classic World War I style fighting that everybody's familiar with. But at this point, the Allies had started pushing the Germans back, and they had left the trench fighting behind for more open field offensive fighting. This meant that Yankee Division would often take German prisoners, but it also meant that they would end up wounded themselves, and this prevented Stubby with another important job: rescue dog. See, the fighting at this point often took place in these wheat fields and in the woods, meaning that men would get separated from the rest of their unit, especially when they were injured. The different terrain also meant that it became more difficult for soldiers to go out and search for their fallen friends, especially when under artillery fire. And Stubby proved to be an excellent search and rescue dog, either finding the fallen soldiers and waiting until help arrived, often signaling their location by barking, or he would find the wounded soldier and then return to the rest of the unit and guide them to him. And if he ever found a soldier that wasn't going to survive, he would lie down with that soldier and comfort the man in his final moments, ensuring that he didn't die alone. But the summer offensive would soon come to an end, and as the weather changed, so did the scenery as the Yankee Division was moved to partake in the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. Now, the Meuse-Argonne Offensive is the largest American military offensive in history, and still is to this day, and I will probably make a video delving deeper into the details of that battle at some point, but for now what you need to know is that Conroy, Stubby, and the rest of Yankee Division are being moved toward the front in the largest logistical operation of the war, in order to play a part in that fight. While on the way, members of a French town gift Stubby a homemade jacket to serve as a thank you for alerting the town of an incoming gas attack, and he would wear this jacket as a sort of uniform for the rest of his life. Shortly after this, they would arrive and prepare for the offensive, and it's honestly more of the same, only on a scale that they've never seen before. More shelling, more gas, and more casualties than they have seen up until this point. And Stubby is right there alongside them, doing his work just like everybody else. However, on September 26th, he will do something that he has never done before. It is not known exactly how Stubby found him, but at one point during the day, Stubby discovered a German soldier who, after seeing Stubby, tried to run off. But Stubby isn't having it and chases him down, and because he's a dog, he obviously is going to be able to outrun this soldier. And this is where accounts vary. Some say that Stubby barked until other American soldiers showed up, some say that he chased him back to the American front, and some say that he bit the German soldier on the ass and his screaming alerted the Americans. Which is hilarious, but all I can think about is how embarrassed that soldier had to be. Like, imagine after the war, him talking to his fellow Germans. Yeah, I got captured after failing a cavalry charge and I was the only survivor. I was captured after getting my leg blown off by an artillery shell. I got captured by a dog biting me in the ass. That is one of the most embarrassing ways I've ever heard of somebody getting captured during war. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive would eventually drag on to become one of the largest and bloodiest fights in the entire war, eventually breaking the German line and driving them back into their own country. As the Americans pushed the Germans further back, the Americans started using more and more mustard gas, which eventually led to Conroy and Stubby suffering injuries from the gas. But thankfully to everyone in the division and the entire army, the armistice finally arrived, with men cheering that Stubby had finally convinced the enemy to surrender. Conroy didn't really record what him and Stubby did in order to celebrate, but I like to think that Stubby was finally given a beer for his efforts. After the peace treaty was signed, Stubby and the Yankee division made their way back through the ground that they had taken during the offensive, and that's where they eventually met with President Woodrow Wilson. They were given medals and celebrated their victory, with Conroy placing most of his medals on Stubby's jacket, which kind of gave rise to the idea that Stubby himself had been giving these medals, which admittedly is not historically true. The only medal that Stubby ever earned was an Iron Cross that he earned through his capture of the German soldier, since it was tradition that the soldier who captured another could claim that soldier's medals. His jacket also had service chevrons, these little triangle shapes, which also denotes a soldier's rank, which is what gives rise to the name Sergeant Stubby, even though he was never given an official military rank. And he's only ever been referred to as Sergeant Stubby in the years since his death, possibly mixing his story with the story of a Marine Corps dog that was given an actual rank. Conroy and Stubby then made their way to Monte Carlo before being sent home aboard a troop transport headed back to the United States. And after arriving home, Stubby began his long tradition of public appearances, including dozens of parades where he would march with his fellow veterans and others where he was on top of floats. He would also make a ton of appearances as a guest of honor at veterans parties and reunions. He met every president of his lifetime and even received an honor from General Pershing. But it was what he did after Conroy returned to college that led to maybe his strangest impact on history. Conroy started working towards his law degree and took Stubby with him to Georgetown University, and while there, Stubby discovered a love for chasing after the football. This led to him being the college team's official mascot. Donning his own jersey, he would take to the field and chase a football thrown by one of the cheerleaders across the field to the cheers of all those in the audience. And he would do this at halftime. And although there's no conclusive evidence, this is quite possibly the first halftime show in history, meaning that Bad Bunny, Left Shark, and Janet Jackson's Titty all owe their fame to Sergeant Stubby. And honestly, I don't really know what to do with that information, but it just continues to prove the theory that literally everything in life today can be traced back to the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. Stubby continued this pattern of life until he died peacefully in his sleep in March of 1926, and his body was preserved where it now sits as a permanent fixture in the Smithsonian. And he even has a bronze statue in the Veterans Memorial Park in Middleton, Connecticut, giving his trademark salute and serving as a reminder that the Great War was won by more than just men, and it is a great reminder that dogs truly are man's best friend. And although it's not definitively proven, I believe he was the first halftime show performer. Thank you for watching. If you want to support me, please share this video with any history nerds or animal lovers. You can also give to my Beer and Books Fund or my Patreon, that'll be linked below, and I'll see you in the next one. The end. I know that there's going to be people who think it's ridiculous to watch a dog chase a football for entertainment, but there's literally a meme about watching the DVD logo bounce around the screen until it fits perfectly in the corner. It's really not that hard to entertain people.